From Houston, Texas, this is the Liberty Root Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Liberty Root Podcast number 2. And if this is your second time listening to our podcast, we want to thank you for coming back, and that's good because we didn't lose you last week. And if this is your first time listening to the podcast, we ask that you go back and listen to our first one and this one as well. Let's see, where to begin today? Yes. The wonderful protesters, believe it or not, are still out there, and they're still as valiant as ever. It seems as though, no matter when you turn on the television or pick up a newspaper or browse the internet, you can't help but to find another city or town across America who isn't erupting in political protest chaos. But the question is the people feeding into them are us, and when will we begin to gain a common sense and finally start to realize that these news outlets aren't really there for the best resource for factual information? And the news pundits who are on these networks, they're only there for one reason why they get paid, and that's their ratings. You see, they decide to make these lunatics famous by dedicating countless hours of their on-air time to these hooligans because they know that you Americans will watch, because something that Americans crave, no matter how sick it is violence in the news. When there's violence in the news, the ratings are through the roof. But maybe, just maybe, if these news sources, instead of solely obsessing over ratings and this hysteria that's out there now, and they could actually begin to at least try to get to the core of what's really going on, we'd be in a lot better place. But however, I strongly doubt that will ever happen, because their paychecks are worth a lot more than their deep-rooted personal value systems. Well, for most at least. There's a few good out there, but for the most of them, that's how they view it. But if they could only come at it with a factual approach, just maybe, and just maybe then, could us as Americans who, rely on the news, like the channels for their information, could start to get a big picture of what's really going on. Because these news channels, they have a huge platform, and their message can get out there really quick with, all the social media that we have today. But the thing that really gets to me, and it's disappointing kind of, because I've started weaning myself off the Fox News channel, and that was one of my go-to, channels when I'd want to get, all the latest political stories. MSNBC, I never even gave them a chance. CNN, I broke from them a long time ago, and then Fox was my recent one about a year ago that I completely cut off from. But you see, Fox News is doing the exact same thing that these other channels have always been doing, by ramping up these violent news stories without giving you the real background on it, or even they don't follow up with what's causing these things to happen. They just show you the worst of it for ratings. And another thing that Fox always does, and it's becoming a thing of just ridiculousness now, is every time they start a show or they come back from break or something, everything's a Fox News alert or breaking news. It could be Donald Trump's tie was crooked during a speech today, and that's a breaking news story for Fox now. But I did see something that was a Fox News alert or a breaking news or whatever it was. They have so many, I can't keep them straight. And I saw it later because, of course, I don't watch Fox News live anymore. But they had Chuck Schumer on there, who was in literal tears over the so-called Muslim ban. And this is my segue into what I want to talk about today. But he was in tears over this Muslim ban. And I want you to take a listen to it.
And I named my daughter, her middle name is Emma, named for Emma Lazarus, the great poet who wrote those lines on the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. What leaves the rest? So, this executive order was mean-spirited and un-American. It was implemented in a way that created chaos and confusion across the country, and it will only serve to embolden and inspire those around the globe who will do us harm. It must be reversed immediately.
And this wasn't an episode of Saturday Night Live. You see, if people like Chuck or the media would actually take the time to read, instead of encouraging these people to take to the streets, they would very clearly realize that this isn't a Muslim ban at all. And that's what I want to talk about tonight. But perhaps Mr. Schumer and the media's liberal ego is skewing their own thought process, which happens all the time. Now, to actually separate fact from fiction, let's shed some light, shall we, on this so-called Muslim ban and really bring to light what's in the text. First of all, the word Muslim can't be found anywhere in the text of this ban. Not even once. And it seems like if one was trying to exclusively ban one religion, wouldn't you think that the word Muslim would have been somewhere in the text? Also, this ban doesn't even include the top 5 most Muslim countries in the world. Those countries being Indonesia, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Nigeria. So wouldn't one think that if this was solely a Muslim ban, that these countries would be listed? Because if this ban was, as people were claiming it to be, against a religion, the Muslim religion, then why are they excluding more than half of them around the world by not listing those countries? The countries, however, who are listed in the ban are Syria, Libya, Sudan, Iran, Yemen, Somalia, and Iraq. But what do all these countries have in common? They're all involved in radical violence, which is directed directly to us, the American people. And that involves our direct intervention. And these countries are a hotbed for terrorism. So acting in accordance to prevent something heinous from happening doesn't sound like something I should be protesting against. Or anyone, for that matter. And nowhere in this ban does it state that it's permanent. It states it's a 90-day ban on our refugee system so we can take a closer look at our vetting system. And in some drafts I've seen 120 days. And as we know, yes, Trump can be quite the pistol, and this particular list could grow into more countries, which, I think it should, such as like Saudi Arabia. But as it stands in this moment, what I just read to you is exactly what's listed in the ban. Now, because people don't want to educate themselves, and you have people calling for 100% open border system, that would be absolute suicide for America. But what's really fascinating about this, the liberals like you to think that they're all for minorities. Across the spectrum, they're for minorities. Here at home and in foreign land. Under the Obama presidency, he let over 12,000 Muslim refugees into our country from Syria alone in 2016. Well, Muslims are in the majority in Syria. And how many Christian refugees did the Obama administration let in 2016? 100. And they're the minority. So wouldn't you think if they prided themselves on support for the minority in the Middle East would also play a role in their thought process? But when the hundreds of Christians are being persecuted in these countries and we only let 100 in, where were the protesters then? Especially if this current outrage is truly about protecting minorities who are in dangerous waters. It's also stated in that document that we allow, under the Trump administration, up to 50,000 refugees into the country each year. Under the Obama administration, that number was 70,000, but during most of his presidency, he was always right around 50,000 year over year. So what's being proposed right now isn't much different than what we've always had, but just with a stronger vetting process. But of course, people need a reason for their so-called feelings to be hurt. What has changed, however, though, the last decade, is the radicalization in these 7 particular countries that are listed in the ban. So a call for a more stricter vetting process is absolutely necessary in this day and age. Unfortunately. Just go across the pond and ask Germany and France how their new immigration policies have panned out over the last couple of years. And that should be all the proof one needs. I mean, they may be slow to admit it, but anyone with half a brain could see the disaster that's ensued since their new policies went into place just a few years back. And now for the first time, they're dealing with an ever-growing terror problem due to their lackadaisical vetting or non-vetting process. You see, they have Turkey, who is freely opening up their eastern border and knowingly allowing these terror cells into their country. And when you have these other European countries, such as Germany and France, weakening their immigration policies, it's just a disaster waiting to happen. It's the perfect storm. But you see, it seems as though that they would rather take the risk of this open arms mentality and putting their country at extreme risk than to upset the general public. They would say things like, "You see, we may have bombs in the street, but you won't see a protest." I mean, really, this is unimaginable to me. And it should be to anybody who has the potential to open their eyes. I mean, I'll be honest. My first thought when I heard of a Muslim ban, I probably had some of the same thoughts rushing through my head as do the protesters. Because during this whole election season, you had Trump on multiple occasions specifically talked about banning the Muslim religion from coming into our country. Or people who practice being a Muslim. So when I heard a Muslim ban, I thought, you can't be serious. The President of the United States is banning a whole religion. But he'd be living up to what he's been preaching this whole election cycle, at least. He's good for his word on that. And even as he was signing the bill, he was talking about a ban of Muslims. So I understand the grayness of this whole, talk that comes from him. But it's the document that's signed to take effect is what matters, not the words coming out of the mouth of the president, or anyone for that matter. And I believe that's what has a lot of the people, or the majority of the people, taking to the streets and doing what they're doing is because of the usage of words by Donald Trump. And that's what bothers me so much about Trump, along with many other things, but this is one stands out to me right now, is it's him not being presidential. It's like, okay, Don, we gave you the gig. It's yours. So act like a president. I honestly believe, deep in my heart, that Trump doesn't want to ban the whole Muslim religion from coming into our country. I honestly don't believe that. But with the verbalization that he uses, makes it sound that way. It's like, you speak and you didn't mean to say it. You wish you could get those words back. I feel like he does that multiple times a day. But I don't necessarily think that he believes that. I mean, I could be wrong. We'll see what happens in the coming months. But what shows signs in Trump, though, that is good, and we need this from a president, is someone that is harsh and someone that has a firm backbone. And we haven't seen that in nearly 3 decades. But he also has to live by the oath that he took to uphold the Constitution of the United States. So before we take up our pitchforks and rush to the streets, can we just for a moment take a pause and educate ourselves before acting? Because no matter what your beliefs are, this has got to stop.
Burning cars and smashed windows. A small group of protesters dressed in black, their faces covered, armed with hammers and bricks. Facing off with thousands of officers on site, many in riot gear, confronting them with flashbang grenades and pepper spray.
All of a sudden, the police officers started to spray pepper spray, and they got our audio technician. They're going to see us running because they're going to throw more flashbangs.
Now, does that sound like people who are really looking to make a change and really looking to make a difference? And does that sound like a people that really grasp a concept? Because to me, it just sounds like a bunch of deranged, mental lunatics who are only looking for fame. But for the rest of you who do have a brain and do have a heart, I would just ask for you to dive deeper before acting. Because even though the verbiage or the wordage may sound like it seems, and sometimes it may, but only by doing your homework, you'll never find out for yourself. And if you don't find out by digging deeper, you'll never be able to stand for anything. Back in a minute. Hello, this is Bryce from the Liberty Root Podcast, and I need your help. Go on our Facebook page today, click like, and also share it to be entered into a drawing to win something incredible. If you already like our page, go ahead and share it, and you'll still be entered into our drawing for something incredible. The winner will come on March 25th's podcast, so make sure you stay tuned to listen to see if you're the winner. So go click like and share today. One of the most brutalest of wars didn't take place on a battlefield, but in a laboratory. In 1879, the first creation of the incandescent light bulb was born. The intent was to have one or multiple in everyone's home, near and far. And once, of course, an inventor experiences a breakthrough, they're always hungry for more. The next notoriety, the next praise, the next masterpiece. The incandescent light bulb was created using something called direct current, and with the dreams of a self-sustaining hydroelectric plant, this is what he envisioned would be finally the answer to the world's hungry power grab problem. The problem, however, with direct current is that it would lose much, if not all, of its energy being transmitted over great distances. So in order to help solve his problem, he hired a 28-year-old engineer and mathematician. The stakes were high for this mathematician, for his boss, the inventor, promised to compensate him immensely if his design could make energy sustainable over long distances. In order not to get his boss upset, he decided to redesign the generators using direct currents. After working with his boss's beloved direct current energy, he proposed a new idea: the idea of alternating currents. Although his boss viewed the idea as splendid, he said it would never be practical and it would never, ever work. The young mathematician was disappointed and ultimately crushed, for he knew he had a great idea to solve the problem at hand. The mathematician's frustration grew as the days and weeks went on. He received constant threats from his boss that if he doesn't have something soon, he won't be compensated for any of the work that he put in. So with all their differences, and the mathematician realizing that direct current wasn't the solution, they parted ways in 1885. And he was never compensated a single dime. The young mathematician, still being angered, set out to form a company of his own, a company to be able to show his former boss that alternating currents was the answer for the world's current electrical problem. But this young mathematician wouldn't go at it alone. He found a gentleman who shared in his ideology in alternating currents. The gentleman even bought some of the mathematician's patents. This particular patent owner and gentleman also owned a big energy company as well. They both dreamed of commercializing the product and making it a luxurious product. With all of their success growing and with them finding ways of making alternated currents practical, the mathematician's former boss was becoming extremely frustrated. He thought if they had found a way, this will surely put me out of business. Within 1 year, the mathematician and the patent owner were installing generators in all houses across the country. The patent owner was the main engine that kept their company going to places like New Orleans and selling their new electricity. They would even sell it at a cheaper cost in some places just to be able to have the mathematician's former boss lose business. Although the former boss wasn't going to give up that easy. He started selling people on the idea that alternate energy is extremely dangerous and shouldn't be bought by any means under no circumstance. He started spreading things like, within 6 months a customer using alternate energy will be dead because of the great risk associated with it. The former boss received a letter in the mail one day. The letter was from a dentist in New York trying to find a way to have a more humane way of performing executions besides hangings. The former boss thought this would be a great opportunity to finally show the world that direct current is the way of the future, and not alternating energy. So with the new opportunity in his lap, he went to his lab and started to work. After experimenting with his direct current systems, he thought of a plan. Now I can show the world just how dangerous alternating currents are by putting a man to death. Then nobody will want to buy one. So that's exactly what he did. He managed to get his hands on an alternating current generator. Once the patent owner found out that he was in possession of one of these, he was outraged. He knew that his currents were safe if they were used in the right manner, but could also be unsafe when using it in a non-traditional way. But even all that, he still thought this surely can't kill a man in a quick manner. So, while the former boss set out to ruin the reputation of the patent owner and the mathematician, his plan backfired. The first man sentenced to the electric chair didn't die right away. After the first shock, the inmate let out a noise and shook violently. The second shot had blood dripping from his ears and nose. The former boss kept demanding for more shocks and more shocks. Finally, after several shocks, the inmate was pronounced dead. The mathematician and the patent owner were horrified and stated that this was an inhumane and uncalled for act. Even with failure, the former boss was still determined to prove that alternating current was bad and that direct current was the way of the future. He continued experimenting with alternating current to prove that it was dangerous and unsafe. He used dogs and elephants as his guinea pigs. Once nobody bought into the idea that alternating currents was a bad thing and it needed to be used every day, the mathematician and the patent owner received a contract to provide all the electricity to the Chicago State Fair. This contract was owned by a company called General Electric. Finally, the mathematician and the patent owner were receiving great recognition from all over the world. This was too much for the former boss to take, however. Even though he would go on to make inventions that would impact the world in a tremendous way, the biggest impact was the honest advancements of the mathematician and the patent owner. They prove that being true to who you are makes all the difference. You see, if Thomas Edison never hired Nikola Tesla, and the idea was never bought by George Westinghouse, our world could be a much different place.
From Houston, Texas, this is the Liberty Root Podcast.
Join us every Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time for the Liberty Root Podcast. Live life, restore liberty, and pursue happiness. Welcome back to the Liberty Root Podcast as we enter into my favorite segment of the evening. It's where we go through and each week we name 5 crazy laws that are actually still on the books to this day. So, here we go. I'm sorry, officer. I didn't see you.
Yeah, we don't want to do anything to scare your children. That's the last thing we want to do. We don't want to scare anybody.
In Connecticut, a pickle can't be called a pickle unless it can bounce. In Idaho, cannibalism is illegal except in strange cases where you have to eat your friend to survive. In the Hoosier State, also known as my home turf, Indiana, you may not catch a fish with your bare hands. In New Jersey, wearing a bulletproof vest while committing or attempting to commit murder is an offense. Well, at least I guess New Jersey is concerned about making it a fair fight. In West Virginia, it is illegal for anyone who is engaged in a duel or who has challenged somebody to a duel or who has acted for at least 1 second in a duel to hold any type of office. Oh man, I love this segment. Anyways, that does it for us here tonight from the Liberty Root Podcast number 2. Again, we thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. And as always, remember to live life, restore liberty, and pursue happiness. Have a great night, everybody. This was brought to you by Liberty Root Productions.